Hey friends, I hope that you're enjoying your studying this far. My name is Kate Lanigan McGregor and I'm here to walk you through Unit 3 on fair housing. So this is a really important chapter. There's a lot of really critical information, a lot of definitions, and a lot of learning. And the outlines and the graphs and the images in your book will really help you to nail down the terms in here. So let's get started. Okay, so how to maximize this unit. So first thing I want you to do is have your book open to the unit and follow along as we go along, okay? And I want you to have your recorder ready, okay? So on your iPhone, that would be your voice memos. And then I think it's called Voice Recorder on Android. All right, you're going to title it Unit 3, Fair Housing, okay? And you're going to follow this timed module, completing each task, including all quizzes. Again, the quiz questions that we ask you are to help you get ready for the test. They're ones that we think might be on there. We'll also give you an opportunity to ask any questions that jump out at you. Okay, so this is a great time to check in with us. And the quizzes are not graded, and you must complete them to move forward. And you can pause or rewind for review so that you can go back and double check on things, okay? And I want you to record your progress as you're going along. So your audio at the end should sound something like the unit that you're in, the terminology, the questions that, so the definitions of the words, the questions that came up, and also the key points, okay? And you're going to use this audio later, all right? So below you have a live chat, and you also have a spot that says questions. And you can ask us any questions that you have. You can jot in right in and we will get right back to you. We are committed to having both of those open from 9 until 9. It'll probably be more closer to 6 a.m. until 11 p.m., okay, that we have somebody available to answer your questions. All right, so let's get started. What is fair housing? Understanding and working within the context of fair housing laws is critical to create and maintain a vibrant and ultimately profitable real estate market for everyone, okay? So what fair housing does is it makes housing available for everybody, and it makes it not legal to discriminate, okay? And we're going to specify that a little bit more. Okay, our unit objectives today are to explain the significance of the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the constitutional legal framework as they relate to and affect the equal opportunity in housing. We're going to describe and explain the various federal laws which protect Americans from unfair housing practices. We're going to describe blockbusting, steering, redlining, and other abusive housing practices. We're going to list the various recourses available to the aggrieved person who believes illegal discrimination has occurred, including acts against real estate professionals. And we're going to describe the importance of real estate professionals understanding and complying with the fair housing laws. Okay, so I hope that you are ready for us to get started on our definitions. So again, what I'd like you to do is listen to my definition, and I'd like you to record your answer to the definition. And if you don't do that, you are certainly welcome to do mine. However, you saying it and you listening to yourself makes this all so much more better. Okay, so administrative law judge, okay, also called ALJ, is the official who presides over a hearing involving a government agency and someone affected by a decision of that agency. The ALJ hears evidence, including the testimony of witnesses, and renders a decision. I will tell you that that has been a question as of late on the test. American with Disabilities Act this act addresses the rights of individuals with disabilities in employment and public accommodations. Blockbusting. Blockbusting is the illegal practice of inducing homeowners to sell their properties by making representations regarding the entry or prospective entry of persons of a particular race or national origin into that neighborhood. So it's basically scaring the people who live in the neighborhood away. Civil Rights Act of 1866. This is an act that prohibits racial discrimination in the sale and rental of housing. And as we go through these definitions I'm going to tell you now, and I'll probably tell you again, is that this Civil Rights Act of 1866, there are no exemptions for. So we're going to kind of cover the laws, who they protect, and who has exemptions. So this one right here, and this is a test question, is there are no exemptions, and the case law has supported this. Conciliation. Conciliation is a form of alternative dispute resolution in which a conciliator meets with each of the parties separately to help them settle their differences voluntarily and without the formality of a hearing or trial. Okay, Department of Housing and Urban Development is the federal agency that has established rules and regulations that further interpret the practices affected by the federal law. For example, HUD or HUD describes an equal opportunity practice, okay? Fair Housing Act, the federal law that prohibits discrimination in housing based on race, color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, and national origin. Fair Housing Amendment Act is the expansion of the Fair Housing Act to include families with children and those with physical or mental disabilities. The Fair Housing Amendments Act amended the Fair Housing Act to provide that housing intended for persons aged 55, okay, so I'm sorry, this is HOPA. They amended the Fair Housing Act to provide that the housing intended for persons aged 55 or older no longer need to have significant facilities and services designed for the elderly. So redlining is the illegal practice by a lending institution of denying loans or restricting their number for certain areas of the community. Okay, so they used to actually just take a red line and draw it right down the map and decide who it was they were going to do mortgages for or not. So steering is the illegal practice of channeling home seekers to particular areas based on their race, national origin, religion, or other protected classifications. Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968 is, as since amended, the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in housing based on race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, or disability. Okay, so those are your terms that are here. I want to just give you another couple. One is called niche marketing or niche marketing, and it's the target marketing of specific demographic population within the bounds of fair housing law. Okay, so we're going to talk about what you can do too. And then the last one is stigmatized property, and that's a property that has acquired an undesirable reputation due to an event that occurred on or near it, such as a violent crime, gang-related activity, illness, or personal tragedy. Some states restrict the disclosure of information about stigmatized properties as a form of discrimination against those people who, you know, had the act happen with them. Okay, so I hope that you got your way through those. So let's talk about equal opportunity in housing. Okay, so those are the terms that we're going to come up with. Those are, again, I told you the importance of your glossary and knowing your glossary, and that is a great example. So the Civil Rights Act of 1866 prohibits discrimination based on race. This is the only one that has no exemptions to it. And this is, you know, that is actually how they word the question. So that's something that you also want to remember about that. And then Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968 is the Fair Housing Act. Okay, and what that does is it prohibits discrimination based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability. Okay, so they extended the reach on that. Housing for Older People Act it's also called HOPA. It's intended for those aged 55 or older, and it says at least 80% of the occupied units have to have a person 55 or older living in them. So the reason they have their own special act is that, you know, when we talked about discrimination, we were thinking of children and whatnot, and as people got older and we wanted to have these senior active living areas or whatever, we realized that we actually do want to have a discrimination of some sort, but it's the opposite of what people thought about. So it protects those senior living centers. Okay, so here are a couple more definitions for you. A dwelling is any building or part of a building designed for occupancy as a residence by one or more families. Okay, so often you'll hear real estate being described as like a single family dwelling or whatever. So it's called a dwelling. A family or familial status is one or more individuals under the age of 18 living with a parent or guardian. This also includes a woman who is pregnant and anyone who is in the process of assuming custody of a child under the age of 18. A family can be as small as a single individual. So the reason they expanded this was because, there's a lead paint law. Well, here's one example is there's a lead paint law that says that children under the age of 6, cannot live in a property that has lead in certain areas. And what would happen is that these people would move in, and then they'd have children who became ill from this lead paint, and the landlord would say, well, they didn't have those children when they moved in. And here's the thing, is that these laws are there to protect them. And in this case, it's, as I say, it extends after. So thinking of having children, assuming custody of children, whatever the deal is, they are included under the umbrella of the laws. Okay, so what is a disability? A disability is defined as, it includes in the Fair Housing Act as a handicap, although the word disability is now the preferred term. A disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the person's major life activities and includes having a record of having such an impairment or being regarded as having such an impairment, even if one does not exist. So this kind of is a gray area for when people have disabilities. And when you're first of all, you're not really allowed to ask them what their disability is. Okay, and if they have a dog that's there for their care dog, you can't ask what the dog is for. You can ask to see the dog's paperwork to make sure that they are, but so there's this challenge, because you may not know what it is that they feel that they're a protected class for, and it's a violation of their rights to pursue it in that way. The other thing on this is, what does mental impairment mean? And there's been times where there's been alcohol that's been involved, or drug use, or depression, and there's all of these other pieces that are really hard to identify. It's not as easy as looking at someone's skin, for example. So just be sensitive of what they mean by a disability, and don't make assumptions when you're out there on the streets. So exemptions to Fair Housing Act. Okay, so I just told you twice that the Civil Rights Act has no exemptions. For the rest of it, what happens is that there's times that they create the law, and then there's kind of like these what ifs, and what about my rights, and what about this? And so they kind of take that law and they start incorporating different kinds of definitions and also different kinds of exemptions. Okay, so these are the exemptions of when you can discriminate against who it is that you're renting to or showing things to or whatever. Okay, and we'll kind of walk through them. And again, this is a memorization thing. It's hard sometimes because you want to kind of go into the, well, what if? But I want us to try to stay focused on that test, okay? So the first exemption to the Fair Housing Act is an owner-occupied building with no more than 4 units. Okay, so if that owner lives there and he or she feels that having children might disrupt, their quiet enjoyment, in the building, or if they, if they, feel that they their rights are going to be impinged on. They have some exemption possibilities there. The second is single family housing sold or rented without the use of a real estate professional. Okay, so we have a lot of people out there who buy an investment and they want to rent it out. And so, they want to rent it out to who they want to rent it out to, and so what happens is that, they will do it themselves so that they don't have to follow the rules as much, and they'll get those exemptions, okay? Whenever there's a real estate professional involved, then, those exemptions, you can't use, okay? So, I had an example where I had a house, it was a two-family, and the woman lived on one side, and she was renting out the second side. And she did not want children there. And the reason she did not want children there truly was because she believed that there was lead paint there. And if there's lead paint, then she would have to de-lead it in order to have children there. But because of that suspicion that she had the lead paint, she didn't want to rent it to children. And what she said was that she worked nights or whatever, and having children next door would be disruptive. So that was what her reasoning was for not wanting children there. That was what her stated reason was. So here's the thing, is that she could make that decision and that determination, but I could not. So I could not help her with this, okay? The next one would be having housing operated by organizations and private clubs that limit occupancy to members. Okay, so they speak of like gentlemen's clubs that only rent to the gentlemen. It would be different organizations that own these properties, and it's a private club. Okay, the rental of rooms or units in an owner-occupied building of no more than 4 units. Okay, so we talked about that one a little bit. Further exemptions are the sale or rental of a single-family home when the home is owned by an individual who does not own more than 3 such homes at one time, and who does not sell more than one every 2 years. Okay, so on the prior slide, I just said that real estate professionals, such as who you want to be probably and who I am, we cannot discriminate. So then I told you about the person who buys that one house, to rent out to people, and so that's not considered being in the business of real estate, that one house. However, if they own 3, okay, then they are now considered in the business of real estate. And if they sell one more than every 2 years, then they are considered in the business of real estate. So even though they are not declaring themselves as a real estate professional, their actions are that of a real estate professional. So they are no longer exempt from that rule. And then the next one is a real estate professional is not involved in the transaction. Again, we just talked about that, is that, if you are discriminating for any reason, you cannot have a real estate professional involved. Okay, and then discriminatory advertising is not used. Okay, so this is kind of a funny one because this is violated all the time. So where they say like, would be perfect for a starter home, or, single, divorcees special, or, walk to the beach or something. So there's all these different things that are specified, and we're just trying to create a picture. But what we're doing is we are leaving out some of that protected class. Okay, so you got to watch out on your advertising. And I think that there's a page in that book that has like some of the things you can say and some of the things you can't say. And it's really kind of funny. Actually, I'll probably put that in the footnotes because I just think that it's amusing for the future. For now, I want you to focus on that test, okay? So I have a fun acronym for you, and this is how you can kind of remember who is protected, okay, by fresh corn. So F is for familial, R is for race, E is for equal, S is for sex, H is for handicap, C is for color, O is for opportunity, R is for race, and N is for national origin. So this might be something that helps you remember that. So as we move into disabilities, the Americans with Disabilities Act requires reasonable accommodations in employment and access to goods, services, and public buildings. So the American with Disabilities Act is a big act, okay, and it's wide, it's very broad on what it covers and what it means. There's two particular titles that affect real estate in our profession. Okay, and the first is reasonable accommodations. So what that means is that there needs to be reasonable accommodations met for those with disabilities. And when you are showing property to somebody with disabilities, you get, again, back to that, the whole idea of discriminating. You can't pick what you're going to show them and what not by, what you think is best for them. Okay. So you need to treat them without that discrimination. And, the gist of it is that by Title I is that reasonable accommodations must be met for those with disabilities. So if someone were to rent an apartment and they needed some reasonable accommodations made so that they could make that work for them, then the landlord would be responsible for doing the work. And then when it was done, that person with the disabilities, when they moved, they would set it back to the way it was, essentially. So that is how that law works. And again, we get into trouble as realtor professionals when we try to make the decision on whether or not they can live there, and that's a mistake. Okay, and then this Title III is full accessibility to businesses, goods, and public services. So if you're involved in any of the commercial aspects of real estate, you would want to know that there's different guidelines, but the accessibility to these buildings, goods, and public services has to be met. The ADA exemptions are property that is covered by the Fair Housing Act, which already prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability. Okay, and then this next one is property that is exempt from coverage by the Fair Housing Act, such as housing for those 55 or older. Okay, so it's kind of like the exemptions are the things that are already covered. Fair housing best practices. So what this means is, as we're looking for that fair housing, things that we don't want to do, it's illegal for us to do. One is blockbusting. We talked about that. That would be scaring the present owners into who might be moving into the neighborhood to try to get them to sell. Steering would be trying to figure out for our clients where they should go based on whatever their, whether they're, where their race is or, whatever. So we have to treat everybody the same. And when the testers are out there, that's what they're looking for. Do we treat each couple or each family that we come, do we treat them the same? And you have to treat them the same. Okay. Advertising, as I said, we can't say like great Hispanic neighborhood or something like that. Appraisals. Appraisers cannot say that this is a, neighborhood with minorities in it, so it's, it's $20,000 less because of that virtue. Okay. They would want to use whatever the comparables were, in the nearby surrounding area. Redlining. Redlining is that mortgage practice where they would decide who they were going to mortgage to and not. And again, they literally took a red magic marker and drew it down the maps and decided what their neighborhood was going to be. Intent and effect. So even when you're trying to be helpful and your intent is to be helpful, the effect may be that you're discriminating. So you really want to watch that. And then a particularly new prickly subject is the response of concerns of terrorism. A lot of times when people are moving into apartment buildings, they'll say, are there a lot of nationalities that have, the terrorism things going on? And they would, and so there was a challenge, like, do you tell them or don't you tell them? This is something that they're asking. And the answer is you could provide, a makeup or a demographic of who's there, but you would not want to you would not want to point out or whatever any one particular group of people, but people do have a right to know. Enforcing the fair housing laws. So here's what happens is someone feels like they've been violated against. They complain to the HUD. We talked about the conciliation that they try to do without getting, the courts involved or whatever. The penalties for violations are $16,000 for first offense, $37,000, $500 for the second offense within 5 years, and the third is $70,000 for each future violation after, within that 7-year period. So again, that one landlord that made one mistake, is a $15,000 mistake, but a chronic offender, they try to really lower the boom on them. So those are the dollars that are charged. So I do want to tell you that some of the literature that you may have or that you may look at may have different numbers. Okay, these are the most updated numbers for you. So these would be the ones that you would want to know for the exam. So state and local enforcement agencies, all real estate professionals should be aware of their state's fair housing laws, and we're going to talk about that next, as well as applicable local ordinances. Okay, so there's 3 tiers of enforcement. There's national, there's state, and then there's local. Locals very rarely have, in this particular case, many changes to what the state and the national laws are, but it's those 3 tiers that you always want to be available. As a professional, you want to know what your neighborhood would do, okay? Threats or acts of violence. So you would want to, a lot of times there'll be people who ask about, is this a safe neighborhood? And what you would want to always do is you would want to send them to the police website where they can look to see what the safety is in that area. They could see who the sex offenders are in that neighborhood. Megan's Law is big out there. There's certain cities that you can't tell, who is in that area. The feeling is that even if you are a violator, or if you've been a sex offender, or you've been somebody, like, you have rights too. So you really want to watch how you present things, and you want to be the person that makes the connection with where they can find out that information. Okay, the Fair Housing Act protects the right of those who seek the benefits of fair housing laws. So threats, coercion, and intimidation are punishable by criminal action. And again, I just want to share it with you. I had a sex offender move into my neighborhood, and I wanted to, do all these things, and the police said, you really can't do anything. Like, they have rights too. So, it's, as a realtor professional, you're going to want to watch how you're doing things and make sure that you stay within compliance of the law. Okay. So what does this mean for us, for real estate professionals? So the first is consequences, is that there are consequences that happen when we violate the laws as well. So there are monetary penalties that are assessed against us. So, if you advertise the wrong way, or if you discriminate, or if you go back to that lead paint and you didn't have a reason for not having those children there, like, it can come back to haunt you. Threat of your livelihood of career, again, you can be suspended or your license can be revoked. And so you do not want to be walking that line. Any commission is not worth making this kind of decision for, okay? So what I want you to do from beyond this unit, and we talk about this all the time, and I know you're in a hurry to get through the material, and I know that you want to get in there, but your habits are so critical and so important. I want you to read the key point review in the unit, and I want you to read it right into your audio. I want you to read the quizzes and the answers that are in the back of the book, and I want you to see if you are right or wrong or why. So spend the time going through and finding out. Go to the quiz bank that we set you up on and customize a quiz on that unit. Again, my 2 suggestions to you are always those 2 bottom boxes. Check off the one that says, do your progress as you go, and the other one is to show explanations. And I literally would read the question, I would guess my question, I would read whether I was right or wrong, and I would read why, okay? And then I would listen to that later when I was studying, okay, when I was doing my passive studying. This is such a big piece. And again, you are going to visit our frequently asked questions on agentrising.com if you want. And you can also give us our live chat below, or questions if you have questions. And again, you can always email us or text us directly with any questions that you may have. We are always here for you. And especially with this being a newer program with the live and the online live, we're going to have a few bumps in the road. So bear with us, hang in there, and know that, when all is said and done, we're going to have like the best program ever. And again, I just want to remind you who the team is. So my name is Kate, and I am the instructor owner of Agent Rising. And here's my information. Dawn is the other instructor who will be working with us, and she's the person who does the live in the classroom. And she also is, she'll be doing some parts of this as well. And then Marie is our Dean of Students, and Marie is probably the person that you will see and seek out the most, because she's the one who has all the details. She'll know your hours, she'll know your quizzes, she's the person who checks the stuff you send to her, and she's the one who really kind of, if your quiz bank's not working, if you have any questions, if you want to come in and do extra hours, she's really the person that, would be I always call her the go-to person. She's the get it done girl. Anyways, this is Kate Lanigan McGregor. Be bold, be awesome, be you, and thank you for rising with us to the top.